Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio from Monday, August 1st, 2022. U.S. Senate starts work on the $739 billion climate, healthcare, and tax bill that Democrats can pass over Republican opposition if all 50 Senate Democratic caucus members vote yes. We'll get the latest from Politico's congressional reporter Anthony Adragna on that bill, which Democrats have named the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as another bill before the Senate that's been stalled. It would expand health care for veterans exposed to toxic burn pits while deployed. President Joe Biden back in isolation after a rebound positive COVID-19 test. White House press secretary says he is symptom-free. Kansas will become the first state since the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade to vote on abortion policy. We'll talk with a State House reporter for the Topeka Capital Journal about Tuesday's referendum. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in Asia. No official word whether she will visit Taiwan, but off-the-record media report suggests she will. Today, a spokesman at the U.S. National Security Council says that if Speaker Pelosi goes to Taiwan, there's no reason for China and the U.S. to, in his words, come to blows, because the U.S. position on the one China policy has not changed. And remembering Bill Russell and Nichelle Nichols, who both just passed away, for their work in their areas of expertise, sports and drama, respectively, but also for promoting civil rights. Now to the Senate floor, and that $700 billion plus bill includes sections on taxes, climate, energy, health care. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer saying the Senate will vote on the bill next week. Here's a portion of his floor remarks focusing on the climate parts of the bill, and also, he says, the ability for the bill to reduce inflation.
This week, the Senate will take action on a groundbreaking piece of legislation, one that we haven't seen in decades, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. Over the coming days, both sides will continue conversations with the parliamentarian in order to move forward the bipartisan birdbath process. Our timeline has not changed, and I expect to bring this legislation to the Senate floor to begin voting this week. Already, leading experts have confirmed the Inflation Reduction Act lives up to its name. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, by no means a liberal group, affirmed that, quote, almost every one of this bill's policies in and of itself will fight inflation, and on net, the entire package most certainly will. That's the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, who our Republican friends often quote. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, recently the Republican leader's favorite economist, said, quote, this bill is fighting inflation, and, quote, this is disinflationary policy that's also going to make the economy more efficient. And Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's, again, hardly a liberal authority, someone who actually served as an economic advisor to Senator McCain, writes that our bill will have, quote, a material beneficial economic impact, unquote, and said that the Inflation Reduction Act will, quote, push inflation lower. That's Mark Zandi. In short, Madam President, the Inflation Reduction Act is going to be just what the doctor ordered to bringing down costs for American families. We're excited and eager to pass this bill through the Senate as soon as we can. And, of course, of huge significance, this is one of the things that makes this bill so historic. By a significant margin, our bill will also be the largest package on climate change ever passed by this Congress. By our analysis, this bill will cut greenhouse gas emissions by approximately 40% by 2030. That's a lot. And independent studies corroborate this. According to a new study by the Nonpartisan Energy Innovation Group, the Inflation Reduction Act would not only create at least 1.5 million new jobs by 2030, it also affirms that our bill will achieve approximately 40% greenhouse gas reduction by the end of the decade.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Senate floor. He reached agreement on this bill. It also includes health care provisions and tax provisions. He reached the agreement last week with Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat from West Virginia, who had been a holdout. Senator Manchin telling reporters today that he plans to speak with Senator Sinema, Democrat from Arizona, who has not announced a position on the bill. Senator Manchin also explaining why he thinks the end product is a good one.
This is not about politics. This is not about a Democrat or a Republican or me as an individual, as a politician. This is a bill, I think, and time will tell. This is a balanced bill that gives us energy security this country desperately needs. It gives us a pathway forward. It gives us ability to take care of ourselves, to be an energy producer, and also be able to invest in a technology for the energy future. And next of all, it's just something that I think is absolutely so needed for our country. So does it affect me politically or not? I didn't look at it that way. I still don't. Is it, people say, well, this is a Democrat bill, Republican bill, or a green bill. This is a red, white, and blue bill, honest to God. That's all it is. It's an American bill.
Senator Joe Manchin speaking with reporters in the hallway of the Capitol Office building where his office is. As mentioned, Senator Sen Sinema has not taken a position. Democrat from Arizona, her office says she's still reviewing the bill. Some Democrats will need every one of their 50 senators to support it. If all 50 Republicans oppose, then Vice President Kamala Harris, President of the Senate, can break the tie in the Democrats' favor. The Hill newspaper reports that Senator Manchin said he didn't keep Sinema in the loop during the talks with Schumer because he didn't know if a deal was possible, but he said he plans to speak with her Monday afternoon. Speaking against this bill for now, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky. Here he is on the Senate floor.
The same Democrats who said that a $1.9 trillion spending spree would not cause inflation are now saying, listen to this, it's a good idea to raise taxes, kill jobs, attack American energy, and hammer American manufacturing, all in the middle of the apparent recession which they have already created. Everyone knows that raising taxes in a recession kills jobs, but that's precisely what Democrats are desperate to do. So here's what they're proposing. A huge new tax hike on American jobs, more than $300 billion in new taxes. The Joint Committee on Taxation says a whopping 50% of that burden would fall directly on our nation's manufacturing sector. So in the middle of a supply chain crisis, Democrats want a huge job-killing tax hikes that will disproportionately crush American manufacturing and manufacturing jobs. Oh, and Democrats also want a huge new tax hike on American natural gas. Natural gas is the single largest source of electricity generation for our entire country. A plurality of all the power in America comes from, you guessed it, natural gas. It's also how countless families heat their homes. And it's the linchpin of our domestic energy independence and our ability to export to our allies in Europe. But the Green New Deal Democrats are coming straight after American natural gas with huge new tax hikes. The result will be higher electricity bills, higher heating costs, less exporting to our European allies, just as Putin is trying to cut them off, and 90,000 workers in the oil and gas industry, listen to this, out of work. Eliminating 90,000 workers in the oil and gas industry in the process.
Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell on the Senate floor. More on the budget reconciliation bill in the Senate. We're joined by Anthony Adragna, congressional reporter at Politico, author of their Congress Minutes Twitter feed. Thank you for being with us. This bill up in the Senate this week. Take us through the procedure and the timeline. Getting through the parliamentarian. At the very end, it's a vote-a-rama. What do we expect this week?
Thank you for having me. We're in the wonkiest part of a wonky process here in Washington, D.C., for Democrats to try to get this climate, tax, and healthcare bill across the finish line. Probably the most obscure part of this is that we have to wait for the Senate rules referee, known as the parliamentarian, to get through and work her will on this legislation to make sure it complies with the Senate's arcane rules and procedures. That process is ongoing. Both sides have sort of presented their case to her. Republicans have been trying to invalidate certain portions of the legislation. Obviously, this all came together relatively, extremely unexpectedly last week. So I think Republicans are still going about those procedures to try to challenge that. Once she gives kind of her okay and signs off on it, it will hit the floor pretty quickly, we expect. There will be what's known as a vote-a-rama. That is a process that allows an unlimited number of amendments to the legislation. And after that, there'll be final passage. Obviously, one thing to watch, and maybe we'll get there, is the health status of all the members of the Senate. Democrats are going to need, obviously, every single one of their members and Vice President Kamala Harris to get this legislation done. So that will be kind of the white knuckle prospect for them all week, is making sure they have everybody available for that vote.
On the subject of needing everybody, there's one Democratic senator who still has not publicly declared, Sen Sinema of Arizona. What's the latest on her?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the question that we're all waiting to have answered this week. She has said that she's not going to comment on the legislation. She famously around here does not do hallway interviews. She said she's going to withhold any official comment until the parliamentarian has completed her review of the legislation. Democrats are still feeling optimistic that Senator Sinema will ultimately be there with them in the end. They note, for example, that she's played a key role in crafting the prescription drug language in the legislation. She's expressed support for the all-time record investment in climate change investments. They expect her to be there, but certainly until they get an official formal signal of yes, there's going to be a lot of anxiety from the conference in just how she may come down on this.
If Senator Sinema were to ask for some changes, could that happen between now and final passage? Is it difficult to do that?
I think that's an interesting question. Procedurally, I don't think it would be that hard to actually amend the legislation if that were something the Democrats need to do. I think the reality there is more of a political one in that, Senator Schumer and Manchin obviously went back and forth for the better part of a year and a half on this legislation, I guess, beyond just the two of them. But their negotiations have been long and hard and tortuous. And so I think the prospect of opening up the legislation at all is probably something that all Democrats would dread. They view this as sort of the cobbled together best compromise they could work out, and I think would be extremely wary at making any changes at this late stage to the process.
We're talking with Anthony Adragna from Politico. Another bill up in the Senate this week, and it's sort of connected to the budget reconciliation bill, depending upon who you ask, is one expanding medical coverage to veterans exposed to toxic burn pits while deployed. What's the status there?
Yeah, this is a really interesting fight. I think this legislation has not been on certainly the national radar screen up until very recently. It's actually passed the Senate and the House by extremely large bipartisan margins before. For procedural reasons, it had to come back and get passed again by the House and Senate. And we thought that was going to happen last week, but in the hours after Senators Manchin and Schumer announced their deal, 25 Senate Republicans that had previously backed this legislation, which essentially is unchanged from the version that passed just a couple of weeks ago, 25 Senate Republicans switched their vote and voted no on a procedural vote. They say that's because of a provision in the legislation that they think could allow hundreds of billions in additional mandatory spending on veterans' health care. Democrats say that's not the case. There's been a significant pushback from people as prominent as comedian Jon Stewart and veterans organizations to this reversal from Senate Republicans who had, again, very recently supported this legislation. They've launched an all-out campaign to get the Senate to basically do what it did a couple weeks ago and pass this legislation. The initial vote was 84-14. So that's what we're watching this week in the Senate. Senator Pat Toomey has insisted on an amendment vote, which Senator Schumer has promised. And we'll see if that vote is sufficient to get Republicans to, again, vote for this piece of legislation, which, again, passed overwhelmingly just a few short weeks ago.
Anthony Adragna covers Congress for Politico, author of their Congress Minutes Twitter feed. Find him on Twitter at at Anthony Adragna. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And activist and comedian Jon Stewart back on Capitol Hill today with the veterans and their supporters who've been holding vigil on the steps of the U.S. Capitol, trying to get the Senate to pass that toxic exposure health care bill.
11 o'clock update, John. What do you want to say from Firewatch?
I can't believe these guys are doing this. And they're out here and they're sleeping on the Capitol steps.
He spent the whole night here.
That's unbelievable.
Night 2.
Oh, Jesus.
I spent one night.
You know, why you have to be out here, I do not know, but let's hope this is the last night you sleep on the steps.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for being here with us.
Jon Stewart at the U.S. Capitol building. The video posted by Matt Zeller, who, according to his Twitter profile, is co-founder of the group No One Left Behind, also affiliated with the Truman Project, an American security project. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has promised another vote in the Senate this week on that bill. Wall Street today, the Dow down 46, NASDAQ down 21, S&P down 11. President Biden's physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, writes in a memo to the White House press secretary about the president's, again, testing positive for COVID-19, writing, "The president continues to feel well as he starts his week. Given his rebound positivity, which we reported Saturday, we continued daily monitoring. This morning, as would be anticipated, the SARS-CoV-2 antigen testing remained positive. The president will continue his strict isolation measures as previously described." The memo goes on, "He will continue to conduct the business of the American people from the executive residence. As I have stated previously, the president continues to be very specifically conscientious to protect any of the executive residence, White House, Secret Service, and other staff whose duties require any, albeit socially distanced, proximity to him. As promised, I'll keep your office updated with any changes to his condition or treatment plan." That was the memo from the president's physician to the White House press secretary. And that press secretary is Karine Jean-Pierre. She spoke with reporters later about the president's condition.
Dr. O'Connor said today that the president's feeling fine, but he didn't mention symptoms. Can you clarify on whether he's even experiencing any minor symptoms, congestion? Where are we on that?
So he is not experiencing, we haven't seen any reoccurring symptoms. That was in Dr. O'Connor's letter on Saturday, so that continues to be true. I spoke to Dr. O'Connor not too long before coming out to talk to all of you. As you know, some of you have had COVID, some of you have loved ones and close friends who have had COVID. Those symptoms that you have don't go away right away. They kind of linger. Those minimal symptoms kind of linger for some time. So you could expect that. And so with that, but there's no reoccurring symptoms. He's feeling fine.
The CDC guidelines on the so-called Paxlovid rebound are a little unclear. Can you clarify on what the expectation is of how long the president will continue to isolate? Is it 5 days after the rebound positive? Are we looking at another sort of clear set the clock and 10 days out from the rebound positive? What's the guidance on that?
So he's going to abide by CDC recommendations. So it would be 5 days as far as the isolation.
Thursday, from the rebound.
The rebound, right, on Saturday, yes. You're about to get, going back and forth there.
The White House press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre with reporters in the White House briefing room. She also said the White House identified 6 additional close contacts of President Biden connected to the rebound case of COVID-19. It's in addition to the 17 close contacts from his original positive test, but the White House says none of those 17 has since tested positive for COVID-19. New York City Mayor Eric Adams today declaring a local state of emergency on monkeypox. New York City has over 1,200 reported cases, about 25% of the total in the U.S. Mayor Adams' office says a declaration of a state of emergency will allow the mayor to suspend local laws and enact rules as necessary to protect the well-being and health of all New Yorkers. This from USA Today. Kansas primary voters on Tuesday will be the first in the country to decide statewide on the right to abortion since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June, putting abortion access at risk in one of the few Midwestern states that allows the procedure. A state constitutional amendment on the primary ballot asks voters whether they want to preserve the right to an abortion, which was protected in a state Supreme Court ruling in 2019. In just a minute, we'll talk more about this with a reporter in Kansas. First, here are some of the TV ads now airing in that state.
It was a shocking decision. Unelected liberal judges, appointed by pro-abortion politicians, ruled the Kansas Constitution contains an unlimited right to abortion, making painful dismemberment abortions legal. Now abortions are surging in Kansas, with the largest increase in 25 years. But you can stop it. Vote yes on the Value Them Both Amendment. Yes to restore Kansas pro-life laws.
Deeply misleading. That's what independent sources call this amendment, because supporters aren't telling you the truth. Here's the proof.
Leaked audio from a leader in the Value Them Both campaign.
Leaked audio suggests legislation to criminalize abortion in Kansas is already in the works.
To criminalize most abortions would be the next step if Kansans vote yes.
That's what's at stake. A total ban on abortion with no exceptions for rape, incest, or a mother's life. Vote no.
Some of the ads airing in Kansas about the abortion constitutional amendment that's on the ballot on Tuesday. Jason Tidd is a State House reporter for the Topeka Capital Journal, joining us now by phone. Thank you so much. What exactly would this constitutional amendment do if it's adopted?
Well, thank you, Mike. The constitutional amendment on its own doesn't do a whole lot. A lot of the debate has been over whether or not it bans abortion, and it doesn't ban it. It doesn't legalize it. The amendment itself would make it illegal for government funds to go to fund abortions, which is already illegal under the law. And then it would make it so that way state lawmakers could regulate or ban abortion if they want to. So the reason for this is that it would effectively overturn a Kansas Supreme Court decision that enshrined the right to abortion into the state constitution.
And what are the polls showing ahead of this vote?
Well, polls have been somewhat limited on this. Both sides have been keeping their numbers pretty close to their chests. The one poll that I have seen shows the vote yes side with a narrow lead, but it was within the margin of error, and neither side had reached 50%. So we are expecting it to be a tight race, but in Kansas, where it's a Republican-leaning state, the vote yes side has always been considered to be the front runner.
Procedurally, this is being billed as the first state referendum dealing with abortion since the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. But was it in response to the Supreme Court decision, or has this been in the works for a while?
No, this has actually been in the works since 2019. That's the year that the state Supreme Court, when they were dealing with an abortion law case, they decided that the Bill of Rights includes language that supports natural rights, and that natural rights includes bodily autonomy, and that bodily autonomy includes the right to an abortion. After that Supreme Court decision, Republicans and anti-abortion lobbyists decided that they needed to try to amend the Constitution to effectively undo that. So they tried in 2020, but there were a handful of moderate Republicans who blocked it from passing. The 2020 elections went poorly for moderate Republicans. The legislature got more conservative. So in 2021, they passed this amendment through the legislature. They needed 2/3 of lawmakers. The Democratic governor here had no authority to veto it, and they put it on the August 2022 primary ballot.
We're talking with Jason Tidd from the Topeka Capital Journal in Kansas. This being the first statewide referendum since the Supreme Court decision, people are going to look at the result, of course, but they're also looking at how it's motivating voters. What have you seen in terms of interest in this constitutional amendment?
Well, both sides have really been energized by this. Lots of door knocking, lots of canvassing. Protest-wise, the vote no, the abortion rights supporters have had more of the protests, the visible to the public kind of events. But fundraising has been through the roof on this. Both sides raised more than $6 million through a mix of in-state and out-of-state funding. So political scientists have said that They expected it to energize people. And until Election Day, when we see the results, we don't know which side got energized more.
Jason Tidd, State House reporter for the Topeka Capital Journal. Find his stories at cjonline.com. And on Twitter, he's jtidd@gannett.com. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Arkansas's Republican Governor Asa Hutchinson saying he is thinking about running for president in 2024. Hutchinson is term limited as governor, be leaving office after this November's election. He says, though, he will not make up his mind about seeking the White House until after the midterm elections. He was interviewed by Washington Post reporter Leanne Caldwell.
As I mentioned before, you are term limited. So what are your plans next? Do you have any ambitions to run for president in 2024?
Well, as I sort of made the point, it's really critical that we save that till after November of this year. And so obviously I'm thinking about it, but not going to have any decision until next January. We're going to focus on this year, but 2024 is so critical in terms of shaping the Republican Party. And so whether it's as a candidate or whether it's in some other role, I certainly want to be a voice. And this is an important point. Somehow people think that if you're not 100% pure behind Donald Trump, then somehow you're a moderate. My record is as conservative as anyone in the United States of America. But I am able to reach across the aisle to help and work to get things done. And so it's an effective message. But I think the test in 2024, can a conservative that has a more optimistic view of America, that doesn't resort to personal grievances, can that person win? And that's what I want to be able to support in the fight for 2024.
Governor Asa Hutchinson, Republican from Arkansas, in a virtual discussion with the Washington Post Leanne Caldwell. Hutchinson also reiterating during today's program, you can find it in its entirety at our website, cspan.org, his criticism of former President Trump about January 6, 2021, and the attack on the U.S. Capitol, saying that disqualifies Donald Trump from further public office, and also saying it's not good for Republican candidates if Trump is the issue before the midterm elections. He said if we get sidetracked on a personality that is divisive as Donald Trump, then that does not bode well for the outcome in November. Also today, a member of the Texas militia, Guy Reffitt, getting the longest prison sentence so far of any participant in the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol, over 7 years. The prosecutors, though, had asked for 15 years. The judge, the U.S. District Court judge, declining the request to treat Reffitt's crimes as terrorism. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Here are some of the live hearings on C-SPAN Radio this week. On Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, the Senate Rules and Administration Committee holds a hearing on a proposal to change the Electoral Count Act, a bill put together in the aftermath of the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. And on Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, FBI Director Christopher Wray testifies before the Senate Judiciary Committee. For more of this week's schedule information, visit our website at c-span.org.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile video app and wherever you get your podcasts. A story at United Press International, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi began her official visit in Asia on Monday, meeting with leaders in Singapore amid repeated warnings from China that she'd better not make Taiwan part of the multi-day trip. China's foreign ministry again warned on Monday against Pelosi making a visit to Taiwan, with a spokesman saying there will be serious consequences if she insists on making the visit. Speaker Pelosi is traveling with a delegation of other members of Congress. Taiwan not on the official itinerary, but several media outlets quoting unnamed sources familiar with her plan saying that she will be going to Taiwan. Taiwan is a self-governing island that China claims as its own territory. White House reaction from John Kirby. He's the National Security Council Strategic Communications Director.
I want to reaffirm that the Speaker has not confirmed any travel plans, and it is for the Speaker to do so and her staff. So we won't be commenting or speculating about the stops on her trip. We have been clear from the very beginning that she will make her own decisions and that Congress is an independent branch of government. Our Constitution embeds a separation of powers. This is well known to the PRC, given our more than 4 decades of diplomatic relations. The Speaker has the right to visit Taiwan, and the Speaker of the House has visited Taiwan before, without incident, as have many members of Congress, including this year. The world has seen the United States government be very clear that nothing has changed. Nothing has changed about our One China policy, which is, of course, guided by the Taiwan Relations Act, the 3 joint U.S. PRC communiques, and the 6 assurances. We have said, and we have repeatedly said, that we oppose any unilateral changes to the status quo from either side. We have said that we do not support Taiwan independence, and we have said that we expect cross-strait differences to be resolved by peaceful means. We have communicated this directly to the PRC at the highest levels, including as recently as last week in the phone call between President Biden and President Xi. The National Security Advisor, the Secretaries of State and Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff have also made this very clear to Beijing in a half a dozen recent high-level conversations. Put simply, there is no reason for Beijing to turn a potential visit consistent with long-standing U.S. policy into some sort of crisis or conflict, or use it as a pretext to increase aggressive military activity in or around the Taiwan Strait. And yet, over the weekend, even before Speaker Pelosi arrived in the region, China conducted a live-fire exercise. China appears to be positioning itself to potentially take further steps in the coming days and perhaps over longer time horizons. Now, these potential steps from China could include military provocations, such as firing missiles in the Taiwan Strait or around Taiwan, operations that break historical norms, such as large-scale air entry into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, ADIZ, I think you all know that acronym, air or naval activities that cross the median line, and military exercises that could be highly publicized. This could also include actions in the diplomatic and economic space, such as further spurious legal claims by Beijing's public assertions last month, like Beijing's public assertions last month that the Taiwan Strait is not an international waterway. Some of these actions would continue concerning trend lines that we've seen in recent years, but some could be of a different scope and scale. The last time Beijing fired missiles into the Taiwan Strait was 1995 and 1996, after Beijing reacted provocatively to Taiwan's president's visit to deliver an address at his alma mater. I want to contrast this now between the United States and China. We, and countries around the world, believe escalation serves no one. Beijing's actions could have unintended consequences that only serve to increase tensions. Meanwhile, our actions are not threatening, and they break no new ground. Nothing about this potential visit, which, oh, by the way, has precedent, would change the status quo. And the world should reject any PRC effort to use it to do so. We will not take the bait or engage in saber rattling. At the same time, we will not be intimidated. We will keep operating in the seas and the skies of the Western Pacific as we have for decades. We will continue to support cross-strait peace, stability, support Taiwan, of course, defend a free and open Indo-Pacific, and we're still going to seek to maintain lines of communication with Beijing. All of that is important, and all of it is preserving the status quo. We expect to see Beijing continue to use inflammatory rhetoric and disinformation in the coming days. The United States, by contrast, will act with transparency. We'll stand up here, we'll answer your questions, we'll give you the facts. We are also committed to keeping open lines of communication with Beijing, as I said. This is what the world expects of not just the United States, but of China. And we encourage Beijing to keep that commitment as well.
John Kirby is Strategic Communications Director for the National Security Council in the White House briefing room. Speaker Pelosi putting out a statement on her first stop, Singapore. It concludes with this line: as we continue our regional travel, we look forward to additional engagement with our partner nations to advance a free and flourishing Indo-Pacific. Secretary of State Antony Blinken also asked about Speaker Pelosi's possible trip to Taiwan.
With regard to Taiwan, first, the Speaker will make her own decisions about whether or not to visit Taiwan. Congress is an independent, co-equal branch of government. The decision is entirely the Speaker's. What I can say is this. This is very much precedent in the sense that previous Speaker has visited Taiwan. Many members of Congress go to Taiwan, including this year. And so if the Speaker does decide to visit and China tries to create some kind of crisis or otherwise escalate tensions, that would be entirely on Beijing. We are looking for them, in the event she decides to visit, to act responsibly and not to engage in any escalation going forward.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken, a news conference at the United Nations in New York City. It was on the sidelines of the reason he was principally there, a meeting for the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty. Associated Press writing on that, there was already plenty of trouble to talk about when a major UN meeting on the landmark Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty was originally supposed to happen in 2020. Now the pandemic-postponed conference finally starts Monday as Russia's war in Ukraine has reanimated fears of nuclear confrontation and cranked up the urgency of trying to reinforce the 50-year-old treaty. Secretary Blinken also asked today by reporters about Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the news that the first ship carrying Ukrainian grain has left the port of Odessa, first time since the war began 6 months ago. First positive step in a deal between Ukraine and Russia brokered by Turkey to ease global food shortages.
Secretary Blinken, on the topic of grain, we know that a ship was able to leave the port of Odessa today carrying 26,000 ports of grain across the sea. Can you give us an update on how that's going? Do you expect more to get out to help the food shortage? And also, is that a sign that tensions might be easing? So
this is a good and important first step. We were pleased to see that the first ship did move. It does have 27,000 tons of grain, but keep in mind, there are something like 20 million tons that are in silos and in storage in Ukraine that's been held back by the Russian blockade of Odessa up until now, and it needs to get out. It needs to get out to world markets. It needs to get to places where people are in desperate need of food. It needs to get out so that prices also continue to go down, not up. The test will be in the days and weeks ahead. It's a start. It's important. I have to say that the leadership of Secretary General Guterres and the United Nations has been absolutely instrumental in getting us to this day when at least we see the first ship moving. But the test is now really in the days and weeks ahead. More ships need to move. More grain needs to get to market. That's what will really make a difference.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken with reporters in New York City. The White House also announcing today that another military aid package to Ukraine is being put together, $550 million. It'll include ammunition for 155-millimeter artillery and for the HIMARS, High Mobility Artillery Rocket System. This is Washington Today. We found out this past weekend that two African Americans who achieved fame and stardom and recognition in the worlds of sports and Hollywood, but also in the struggle for civil rights, passed away. NBA Hall of Famer Bill Russell, first black head coach in any major sport. He was 88 years old. And actress Nichelle Nichols, best known for her role on the TV show Star Trek. She was 89. Bill Russell was on C-SPAN in 2014 at a civil rights summit hosted by the Lyndon B. Johnson Presidential Library in Austin, Texas. 2014 was the 50th anniversary of the signing of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. He was on a panel about race and sports. Here he talks about lessons from his mother.
I was born in the segregated South in the 30s in Louisiana. Mm-hmm. And my mother, our first conversation, said to me, "There's nobody on this planet any better than you. Also, there's nobody on this planet that you're better than them. And so I grew up with confidence that I was okay. And my mother and father always treated each other with respect. And so when I went out into the world, that's the way I thought it was supposed to be.
Okay. And did everything you could to change it to make it that way when it wasn't.
Uh-huh.
Did everything that you could to make it that way when it wasn't.
Well, my mother told me when I was young, she says to me one day, you can play in the front yard for the first time. She had kept me in the backyard all the time. And she said, the reason I want you to play in the front yard is people will walk by and they will say things to you, good or bad. But it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them and their perspective. You play and have fun, and don't worry about that.
Okay.
And so when I grew up, I encountered things. I knew I was okay.
Boston Celtics basketball legend Bill Russell in 2014 at the LBJ Library in Texas from C-SPAN's video library. Former President Barack Obama tweeting on Sunday that Bill Russell was the greatest champion in basketball history and a civil rights trailblazer. He tweeted, "Today we lost a giant. As tall as Bill Russell stood, his legacy rises far higher, both as a player and as a person." Russell's family announcing on Sunday that he died at the age of 88. As mentioned as well, actress Nichelle Nichols passed away at the age of 89. Back in 2010, she was interviewed by the Television Academy Foundation describing meeting civil rights leader Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King shortly after she had decided to leave the TV show Star Trek, in which she played the character Lieutenant Uhura. Dr. King calling that the first non-stereotypical role portrayed by a black woman in television history.
He said, "Don't you understand what this man has achieved, is achieving or something?" And I thought, deja vu all over again. I just looked at him. He said, "For the first time on television, we will be seen as we should be seen every day, as intelligent, quality, beautiful people who can sing, dance, but who can go into space, who can be lawyers, who can be teachers, who can be professors, who are in this day, and yet you don't see it on television until now." And he went on, so many of the things, perhaps some of the things he said, but I could say nothing. I just stood there, realizing every word that he was saying was the truth. And he said, "If you leave, Nichelle, Gene Roddenberry has opened a door for the world to see us. If you leave, that door can be closed because, you see, your role is not a black role. And it's not a female role. He can fill it with anything, including an alien." And at that moment, the world tilted for me. And I knew then, I didn't want to know it because I was going to go through some more turmoil for the rest of the week. But I knew that I was something else, that the world was not the same.
Actress Nichelle Nichols, interviewed in 2010 by the Television Academy Foundation. She has passed away. President Joe Biden putting out statements honoring both Bill Russell and Nichelle Nichols, who have died. When it comes to Nichelle Nichols, he writes, in Nichelle Nichols, our nation has lost a trailblazer of stage and screen who redefined what is possible for Black Americans and women. Our nation is forever indebted to inspiring artists like Nichelle Nichols who show us a future where unity, dignity, and respect are cornerstones of everyday society. Thank you for listening to Washington Today. For more top Washington stories sent to you every day, subscribe to C-SPAN's evening newsletter Word for Word. Sign up at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night.